Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Decryption and I hope you are well. In the last few episodes of the toolbar series, we've gone and added our new toolbar. We can open levels with just a click and we can even search down all of our levels and quickly change to them like so. It's really cool and it's such a nice quick editor shortcut. In this next episode, what we're going to look at is adding a new button in order to add widgets and show custom editor widgets. So we've made a couple before, like our patrol points and our asset selection saver, but we're going to make a new one that can create us an entire map, save it and populate it with things we need. So let's get started. The code I'm going to show is mainly for just showing widgets. So if you want to show any type of widget, you'll be able to. But we are going to take it one step further. And if you've watched any of my starting series of where we create things, we tend to set up a lot of dev maps. These are just tiny little maps. It just shows off a single piece of functionality so we can test it in a confined world. Like the hide and seek map here is solely made just to practice the hide and seek system. Or we've got the death scene, which shows, the amazing Batman deaths we've done. We've got loads of them, and it's a lot easier than spawning the main world up every single time you want to try a small function. But every time I come and create a dev map, I have to create the new world, I have to save it, I have to place a very large plane in, I have to place a NavMesh, I have to place ultra dynamic sky, and whilst it doesn't take very long, it still takes time to do. And if we can do that in a couple of seconds, it's just going to speed things up. And it's a good thing to have for your editors or your animators, those people who will build your game with you. You can have access to these quick tools. So you are going to have needed to have watched a previous video on how to set up the toolbar, and we've got a bunch of helper functions like setting up submenus and sections. And you are going to need the previous video because that made us set up a bunch of helper functions for like submenus, buttons, sections and stuff like that. But let's get right into it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to come and duplicate this add level button function, and we will go over it in a moment, but I'm going to call it add widget. And inside here, the first thing we do is we extend the menu so we can actually start adding it to a specific menu, whether that's a sub menu or a drop down or the toolbar. And then we construct the level button, but we don't need that anymore. So I'm going to come and duplicate toolbar button level, and instead I'll call it toolbar button widget, and I'll open it up. We can delete the load map part and the file name because we don't need either of those. And instead, I'm going to come and add a editor widget, and the type will be editor widget blueprint. And we want editor utility widget blueprint, and we'll choose soft object reference. I'll then come and load this blocking. If any of you have watched the first episode, this will feel very familiar, and I'll resolve this so we can get it. I'm going to get the utility subsystem. Editor utility subsystem, and from here I will just call spawn tab, and spawn and register tab is the one we want. Connect it all up like so. You can then come to the class defaults and modify some of these if you want to. There is a link that I keep posting in the description. It's got a list of all the different icons. So if we just search for, say, something like, have we got anything to do with widget or something like that? You can really put any icon on you want, to be honest. And we'll set that inside the style name and the small style name. For the section, I'll keep it as levels for now, but we can override it. The name, I'll call it something unique. So I'll call it open widget. The label, we'll call open widget, but we will override all this in a moment. And the final thing we'll do on this widget is we'll just make sure the editor widget is exposed on spawn and instance editable. That'll help us when we create. So we can hit compile and save. And then back on our toolbar additions, we can now show this one instead. So you can see it's wanting the editor utility widget. So we'll pass that back into our add widget button. We'll then disconnect it using Alt and then just do get editor utility widget like so, just so it's a bit neater. We'll also modify our new button local variable to be new widget button, and it will be our toolbar widget button. And now we can connect our button up like so. We can get the data just like normal. It'll allow it. That's fine. They're pretty much the ones we do want to override, so that's not a problem. The open level is not going to be a level. It'll probably be a widget. So instead of passing all of this, what I'm actually going to do is rename file name to widget name. And we'll just drag that into there like so. So it'll say open, whatever widget you want to call it. The name, I'm just going to plug the result directly into as well, because it doesn't really need to be any different, because that's unique as it is. We need to reset the data back on the target, and we also need to push that one like that. So we've got a very generic setup for this now. And we've got a way to add a widget button, which takes our custom widget. So back on the event graph now, after we've loaded all of the maps, which is something we did last time, so we're keeping track of the comments, just under all of this, I'm going to drag in our add widget button, connect it up to the completed. We don't want it during the loop. I'll connect it into the get menu data, which is something we were doing from the very beginning. But equally, you can just make it a bit easier and just paste it all the way down here, just so you don't have loads of lines everywhere. The menu name, we've got right here. So that's if we want it as part of the submenu, but we don't want it in the submenu. We want it at the base level, which will be this one here. And this is the name of this menu right here. There is a command you can run if you don't know it, which is tool menus edit 1, and then you'll get little edit icons, but we covered all that in the previous tutorial. So I'll just add this into here like so. The widget name, which widget are we going to spawn for now? We'll spawn the asset selection. So I'll paste it in, but I'll rename it and make it look nicer, like so. The section, it will be inside the level section. Well, actually, no. We'll create a new section for this. We'll call it tools for now. And we want to open this widget. So in theory, let's give this a go and see what it looks like now. So if I come back to my level and run this, you'll see nothing's changed, but we now have our open asset selection saver. We haven't got a section for it though, because we added it to the section of tools, but we've not created that section. But luckily, we've created a really helpful tool to do this, a little function. So we'll drag this across a bit, add our section in beforehand, connect it all in place, and then we want it to be called tools, and the label will be tools. So in theory, if we compile and save this time, rerun our tool, we should now have the section of tools up. And if we select it, our widget does indeed open up. And we can add as many here as we want. So I've got patrol paths, so we can add that as well. I'll take this widget button, just paste it at the side of it. I'll drag the get menu into it. We want it inside the toolbar additions, but it's called patrol points. And then we want the actual editor utility to be the EUB. Compile and save, back to our map. Right click, run, and you'll see we now have our open patrol points, which opens the menu. That's all good, but if you haven't got any editor utilities you want to open at the moment, it's going to be a bit useless. So let's create a new editor widget so we can make it create the dev map for us. So I'm going to come back to my editor folder, and I'm going to right click and do editor utilities, editor utility widget. I'll choose any of these because we'll probably change it shortly. So I'll just choose Stackbox. I'll call it EUB for Editor Utility Blueprint. And we will call it New Map Generator. And I'll open it up. So we have a typical UI widget here that you're used to seeing if you've done any widget work. So let's have a quick think. What do we need? We're probably going to need some form of text so we can say what the options are. So we'll just stick that in there for now. And we need some form of editable text so we can say what the name of it's going to be. So let's start work on this. So this text block here, I will just call it level name, and I'll put a colon. And then let's cut these and delete that stack box. I'm not a fan of it. Let's add a vertical box. And then inside that, we'll add a horizontal box where we can paste in our content like so. Look. I still don't know why all my text boxes are going to black every single time. It's like something's glitching it out and setting it. But that will be the name of our level, so let's just make it fill the screen for now. I'm not a great UI designer. We can add a bit of padding to the left. Basically, we'll just keep duplicating these horizontal boxes for each section we need if you wish. But before we do that, I'll rename this editor text box, so ETB underscore level name. And I'll make sure it's a variable just so we can access it. I'll then duplicate this horizontal box. Let's call the next one add floor. And I'll just do a question mark. I'll delete the editable level name because we don't need that now, but instead we want a editor utility checkbox. Don't use normal checkboxes, they don't work the same in the editor. And I'll call this ECB for editor checkbox underscore add floor. And I'm going to come and actually set the default to checked because I pretty much always want to add a floor, but it's nice to have the option if we want to change it. Then I'll duplicate this again and let's start thinking what else do we want. So we're going to want a NavMesh. So add NavMesh. We'll rename it to add NavMesh. That'll be ticked by default. Horizontal box. Again, let's rename this one to add ultra dynamic sky. And I pretty much am always going to want it to do that as well. I'm actually thinking it might be nicer to actually put the checkboxes to the other side, like so. A bit different. And if we move the padding to the left, it might actually be nicer because actually you come in, you set your level name, but then you go tick, tick, tick straight down for whatever you do or don't need potentially. But now you can pretty much add anything you want into here. As long as you can figure out how to code it, you can pretty much do it. I can't think of anything else to add for now, so I'm going to come to the vertical box, and just for a nicety, I'm going to wrap it with a size box, so we can just basically fix its size. It doesn't need to be a massive widget, and you may have to come and set it to desired at the top. 500 by 500, a nice square widget is what we're going to get. If we just click run, this is what you're going to see right there, look. It could even be smaller than that, to be honest. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And the only other thing we need is a button to actually say yes or no, pretty much. So we'll come into here and we'll add our editor utility button, add that right at the bottom, and we need to add some text inside of it. So let's just copy one of our text, paste it inside, and we will call this. We don't want this button to stretch across all the way because it looks a bit weird. So I'm just going to shrink it into the middle. I'll give it some padding to push away from the top like so. I'll probably put it to the end. So you come in, you put your level name in, D1 to floor, NavMesh Ultra Dynamic Sky. I'm pretty much only ever going to set the level name for mine and click create. You can absolutely add other options, such as add the NPC spawner if you want to add that. A specific game mode override, you could have a drop downs of those if you want to. There's loads of ways you can take. So the only other thing I'm going to do now is on the edit utility button, which I'll just rename to EUB create. I'm going to come down and click on clicked. And then we only really need to do one safety check. And that's to make sure you've actually put a level name in. Because if you untick all of these, you'll get an empty map. That's fine, that's what you might need sometimes. But the level name must be populated. So I'm going to get the ETB level name, I'll get the text from it, and I'll convert that to a string. And I'm just going to check, very basically, is the length more than, say, 3? Because we really don't need it to be any less than 3, because then you run into issues. So if it's false, then we'll just not do anything, really. You can show an error message if you want, but for me, it's me using this. So if you've got a bunch of artists and stuff, you could show an error message, stuff like that, if you really wanted to. Just add a text, make it visible, invisible. I don't need to do that. So that's okay for me. So if it's true, then we're all good. We can actually now call it to create it. But there's something with this specific editor widget we're doing, which we've got to compensate for. If we come and open the widget like that and we tell it to perform something, one of the things it's going to do is create a map and then move to it. If I move to a map, there are some cases where this editor utility widget will forget what it's doing because you've changed the editor, you've moved the place. So we need something that's always going to be running, whether you change screens, like if I go to there, it stopped running, which is not great. So we need it to actually remember what it's doing. Now we do already have the toolbar additions here, which is running permanently because it's always there. Whether we come on or off, whether we open another widget, it's always there. So that's always running in the background. So you might be okay to add the code to create the map in with that widget. Unfortunately, you might not be. So what I'm going to do, just for ease sake, is I'm actually going to add the code to create the map in my toolbar additions utility object. And then that can run it even when it's changing maps, multiple maps, anything like that. And it's super easy to do. So back on our map generator, all I'm going to do is add an event dispatcher here called onMapSavedClicked. And we can drag this in to there and click call and connect it to properties into here. So all of the inputs for what we want to actually bring along with it. So we want the level name, which will be a type of text. We want the add floor, Boolean. We want the add NavMesh. And we want the add UDS, which will also be another Boolean. And now basically we can get all of that data and plug it in to this event call here. So all it is getting the value or getting the text. So if we want the add floor, drag off and we'll do get checked, or we can do is checked, that works. Connect it to the is floor, NavMesh, and we can also do UDS at the same time. Copy, copy, connect, connect, and we can just connect it up like that. And we can hit compile and save. So at the moment, that won't do anything. So if we stop and restart it, clicking it does absolutely nothing, even if we type stuff in. But what we can now do is if we jump back to our toolbar edition, where we create this widget button here, specifically our new one, paste it in, we'll just create it across. We'll add our new map generator. Let's call it create dev map. And we just need to get menu. So that's pretty much everything we need to do. but I'm going to come and modify this widget button so it actually returns the widget it's created, because then we can plug in to the event dispatcher and then handle it inside here. So easy enough to do. Jump into the add widget button, right click and just do return. So add return node. And then right at the end, we can just return our new widget button, and I'll just drag it to the return node so you can see it returns created button. And for every other one, completely fine. We don't need to touch it at all. However, for this last one, we can now get access to tab that it's spawned. And we can do that by just promoting this spawn and register tab to a variable and call it spawned widget. And now back on our toolbar additions, from here we can drag off and we can do get spawned widget. We can now drag off and we'll just temporarily cast it to our new map generator. You can also use an interface here if you want, but typically for me, if the toolbar's open, I'm okay with the map generator being in memory. It's not like it's going to be running in game. And then from here I can drag off and do assign on map saved. But instead of actually doing it as an event, I'm actually going to come and create event, but I'm going to make it create a matching function. So it's all hidden away like that. I'll come and call it map generator clicked. And then back on our event graph, just make sure it's selected the correct one. Let's wrap this in a comment, at least this part, map generator button. And then I can come and wrap all of this in editor widget button, like so. So at least we know when we're browsing quickly what each subsection is doing. Now for the big one, let's actually make the map generator clicked work. So the first thing we want to do is actually create the new map, because we can't really add the floor, the NavMesh and UDS if we haven't created the new map. And to create the level is super easy. Simply right click and get the level editor subsystem. So get level editor subsystem, drag off and do new level. Plug this in. The asset path is the location you actually want to save it, including the name of it. So we'll just drag off of the asset path and do append. Then type in where you want it. So it's /game is always the start of it. And then for me, it's maps/dev maps. That's where I want to place mine, with an ending slash, and we can connect the level name into it like so. However, if yours is different, make sure you update the path. However, because 5.7 isn't around yet with that fantastic new asset naming system they've got, I'm actually going to make sure that my assets are all named the same. So for me, in my maps folder, I call all of mine M underscore. I don't want to have to do this on the text box, so let's automate it. I'll add another pin, disconnect B and connect it to there, and I'll just call it here M underscore. So it will always save it into that location with M underscore and then that there. Yes, I could combine A and B. I'm just going to leave it separate so I know it's a thing I can change. Do we want it to be a partitioned world? It's not really going to be. My dev maps are never really that big that they have to be partitioned. We could, of course, make this an option in the list, but for now, I'm going to keep it unticked. And that will basically create the map for you, just like that. But how do we go about start adding the floor, the NavMesh, and the UDS? Well, we actually need to open that map. So if we copy the level editor subsystem, and from here we will just call load level. Remember not to use open level, because open level is for gameplay, load level is the actual editor functionality. And then we need to give it the full path that we want to open, which we coincidentally have right here. And you can go ahead and try it now, but let's risk it. Let's actually just keep going and build the world out. So we can now basically come here and for each of these options, start applying it. We've basically got a world and we've opened it. So we will do create world and open. So over here, let's do the first one. If we just do a branch and then drag off backwards and do get add floor, should we add a floor to it? Yes or no? If it's yes, so true, then we will do spawn actor from class. The class type will be our static mesh actor. So we'll set this to static mesh actor. The location, I'll keep it 000, that's fine. Then I can drag off the return value and do set static mesh for the static mesh component like so. The static mesh is going to be our standard plane. So let's go and just copy that instead of scrolling through all of that. So we'll copy it there, back to our toolbar, and we'll just select it like so. And then we of course need to handle the scaling. So let's drag off the return value one more time and do set scale world 3D. So it wants to do it to the mesh component. So we've not got duplicates. And the new scale, what scale is it going to be? 100 by 100 by 100 is what I set it to. So we'll wrap this in a comment saying add floor YN for yes, no. If it's false or if it's completed, that's where we move on to the next one. So we'll come down here, we'll add a branch, drag backwards, add UDS. Should we add UDS to it? If it's false, remember, or if it's finished. So you can really place this any way you want. I'll probably place mine there, and we'll just have it cascade down. And then we pretty much still do the spawn actor from class, but this time we want the actual UDS, which if I come to my Ultra Dynamic Sky folder in Blueprints, is going to be Ultra Dynamic Sky. But then we need another version of it for the weather. We'll paste that in as well, look. They can just spawn directly in the middle. That's pretty much add UDS YN done. So we're all good with that one. And then the final one is the NavMesh. So we'll pretty much come and copy the first chunk of this without the second spawn because we don't need that. And again, on completed or false, add NavMesh, yes, no. This will become add NavMesh like so. And then the X class we want to spawn is going to be our NavMesh bounds volume. And then we can drag off of this and do set world scale. And it wants to do it for the brush component. That should be okay, I believe. So let's go and get the scale of it. So we will come and select the NavMesh here. What scale is 52, 52, and 1. Okay, that's fine. So we'll do 52, 52. I'll do 10. So it's a big thick NavMesh. And then finally, after that, we really just want to call save on this map. So it's saved and we don't need to worry about having to save it either. So I'll come down to the level editor subsystem, drag off and do save current level. Plug it into the false, plug into there, and we can pretty much just call it final save. You can also do a branch check if you want to see if it's failed for any reason, but let's give it a try. I've made one slight mistake in recording this, and it's something I should have thought about, but it doesn't matter. We can fix it now. And that's spawned widget doesn't exist when we create the button, because the widget only exists when we actually click the button. Because in here, it only runs when we execute it, and we don't execute it without clicking it. So what we actually need to do is tell this to wait for spawned widget to exist, and then plug into it for when we click the save button. It's a super simple fix. All we're going to do is back on our editor widget button here, add an event dispatcher called onWidgetSpawned, and I will output the widget, which will be a type of editor-utility widget. And we don't want the blueprint version this time, we just want the standard widget. The blueprint is the one we are creating. We can now call this, passing in our new widget like so. Then back on our toolbar additions, where we're binding to the spawned widget, we'll just move that across, and instead we'll do assign on widget spawned. So this will tell us when the widget has been spawned, and then we can now cast to it if we need to, and we can perform the options we need to like so. So let's compile and save and give this one more try. So if we come back to our map, right click and do run editor utility blueprint, we can now come and create our dev map. So let's call this character spawning test. We'll tick all of them and just click create, and you'll see everything is now created. How cool is that, ladies and gentlemen? All from our little editor blueprint, we've managed to create an entire dev map. Now there are some minor issues with it. Firstly, the NavMesh is, well, it's not round. Now we've got two choices. We can just wiggle it and it fixes it, or we can see if there's a code alternative for it. And we've also got the weather in not a great state, so we can also add something in for that. So back on our toolbar additions, let's jump into our map generator clicked here. So we'll drag off of this and do execute console command. And the console command we want is rebuild navigation. All one word, capital L, capital N. And we also wanted to modify the UDS weather part. So what I'm actually going to do is jump back to my widget, my map generator widget. Let's add a new option in. So inside the UDS horizontal box, let's add in the editor utility combo box key or string. We'll drag it in just below the horizontal box here. I'll rename it to ECB for editor combo box UDS weather. And I do kind of prefer having it under it saying what weather type do you want. So what I'm actually going to do is wrap this horizontal box with a vertical box by right-click wrap, and then duplicate the horizontal box and move the combo box under it like so. So that way we have it up there, but we have a gap here. Just to show that it's a child of that, I am going to come and give it some left padding of like 50, just so it's bunched across a little bit, and we'll hit compile. Now we need to give it some options, so we'll come back to the graph, and on construct, I will just drag in our UDS weather, and we should just be able to type in add option, like so. So we need to actually get the list of options we can do. So if we come back to the character spawning test, select a random weather, and then open it up, we can see the type up here is UDS weather settings. So back on our generator, I'll just create a variable called allowed weathers. So I'll set the variable to be a name, which is the option what we're going to put in, but I'm going to convert it to a map and set the value to be the UDS weather settings. So what this means now, if we hit compile, is in the default value, we can click add, we can add an option, so like clear skies, and we can come and select the option that's appropriate for it. And you can really put any you like in. You could either go through and do them all if you want. You could even write an editor script to go and grab everything. I'm really only going to do the ones that I commonly use for the biggest dramatic changes, because I don't need every single one. If you need that level of customization, you're probably going to be better just going in and doing it yourself. There, so I've added those options, and that really means now on construct we can drag the allowed weathers in, we can get the keys, we can loop over them, and we can simply call add option for each of the keys like so. What I'm also going to do is take in the UDS weather, and I'm going to set the selected option. So I'll just drag off the keys and do get, and I'm going to plug it in. And this just means that it's got a default value always. Allowed weathers. One other nicety that I'm going to do, which at this point is entirely just flexing really, is on the horizontal box for this UDS, I'm going to come and find the visibility option, and I'm going to click this binding function here and create a new binding. And all I'm going to say is a select on this value here and say, if our UDS is checked, plug it into the index. If it's true, make it visible so we can interact with it. If it's not, collapse it. Hit compile. Jump back to our widget, you can see it's there, but if I come and set this checked state to unchecked, that will disappear when it runs. I thought it would do it in the editor, I was wrong. But if we click run, you can see as we untick it, it hides it like so. So you'll see we've got a minor error about it saying on generate item widget, it doesn't know what to do. Let's just come and click on generate item widget and click create. And you'll see if we run it this time, it will indeed have our options in it, but it's got an error where it's asking for this generate item widget. I'll be honest, I don't know fully how to handle that, but an easy fix is to instead add the string combo box, because that appears to be a lot looser in a sense. So we'll delete that UDS weather and click yes, don't worry about it erroring. We'll rename this one to be the new one, and then back in the graph, we'll just add in our UDS weather, we'll drag up and do add option, where we will plug in the array element, because it's now a string instead of text, like so. And we'll also set the selected option, or we can even do selected index, which is easier to be honest, and just plug it in like so. Doing it this way just means that it shows a normal drop down, but it doesn't error look. Perfect. I did see if we could get a typical asset picker in, you know, where you can assign the actual object. Apparently that is slate only, so we'd have to do a little bit of C++ to make that work, which we're not doing that right now. But we've now got the selected weather, which is very nice. You could also take it one step further and just add a timer as well, so you can set the time if you really wanted to, which we will come and drag in the editor utility spin box. We'll place it below the UDS weather, but I'm actually going to replace the horizontal box with a vertical box, so it all goes down like that. I won't make it full width, I'll just make it to one side, so it only goes as long as it needs to. The spin box, I will just call ESB for editor spin box underscore time. And I'll come and set the value to be something like, I don't know, 800 is a good one. The minimum will be 0 and the maximum will be 2400, because that's what UDS allows. If we now come back to our graph, we can come and modify our event dispatcher to add in the extra properties. So we'll do UDS weather, and that will be a type of UDS weather settings. And then we can also do UDS time, and that will just be an integer. So how do we get these two options? Easy enough. We drag in the UDS weather selected option, and now we've got our string. Then we grab the map and we do find plugging in our string like so with the conversion, and that will give us our weather. For the time, super simple, grab the ESB time and do get value. And we can plug that in up to the time like so. It automatically converts it to a integer, weird integer for some reason, but that's fine. Hit compile, save, back to our toolbar additions. In the event graph where it binds onto it, if we tell it to regenerate the function, you'll see it's erroring because the function hasn't got the right properties anymore. Super simply, come over to the function and we'll just add them. So we'll add a new one and we'll call it exactly the same thing we did here. So UDS weather, and that'll be a type of UDS weather settings. And it was UDS time, which is a type of integer. Hit compile and you'll see it will all sync back up nicely, which means when we come in and spawn UDS, for the weather, we can drag off and do weather, and it will ask for what weather type we want. We can simply get our UDS weather and plug it in. That's happy with it now. Make a bit of space for this one. We can also drag off this and do set time of day, plug it all in, and the time of day is going to be our get UDS time, and it will just convert it to a float. We probably should have been better doing it as a float, but it's completely okay. And then the final thing is just to make sure we reconnect it back up so it knows what to do. Equally, you could just use a sequence, to be honest. It might look a bit neater if you did, so let's just quickly add that in. So from here, I'll just come and add a sequence. I don't use them often, but for something like this, it seems too good to not. So add floor, yes. If we fail it or we don't fail it, it doesn't matter. Come and check the UDS. If we fail it or we finish it, doesn't matter. We can grab the NavMesh stuff, drag it over here. We can also do the final save. Make sure we disconnect it because we don't want to double run it. And we can just add the sequences in like that. Just makes it a bit neater so we can basically look down instead of having to double join everything. There we go. Hit compile and save, and now let's run it for the final time, ladies and gentlemen. And now we can come to our dev tools, click open create dev map, and we can come in and type our dev map. So character switcher, final, tick everything we need. We've got our options. If we untick, they hide and show, which is great. So we'll say I want some rain, but it's early morning, so that's 600. And we can hit create, and with all of that, it creates the map. And we are in the current time. It's raining, it's thundering. How cool is that? So the NavMesh fix didn't work for what we hoped it would. And from what I've been looking in Unreal 5.6, they've kind of nuked it, so you can't really do it without C++ anymore. You can come in and just wiggle it to anything, and it will fix the issue, just like that. But the other option is you can go down a C++ route if you want to. For me, just coming in and setting that to 0 is still far better than having to rebuild all of this myself. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that was helpful. Our new tool has made life just so much easier when we're creating new little dev maps. So thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful. If you've got anything else you'd like to see us modify the toolbar to do, let me know below. My name is Decryption, and I will see you next time.